today, David Frankel, and we all know, well, we know David from his pottery that he has brought here at holiday time for the last couple of years, and he always shares info about the Potter's Guild, and it turns out that David is very involved with the Baha'i, local Baha'i church, and that's often why we don't see him here on Sundays, but we have Linda, David's wife, come and share our community. But David offered to give his talk today and enlighten us a bit about the Baha'i faith. And so thank you, David. I welcome you to come on up, and we look forward to hearing what you have to share with us.
Well, it's a privilege to be here. I've led meditations here before, but this is the first time I'm the main speaker, and I feel a bit nervous about it, but as my wife reminded me, it's a very loving and supportive audience, and I really do appreciate that. I'm wondering how many have heard or know something about the Baha'i faith. That's good. Looks like slightly more than half. Baha'i and our founder, Baha'u'llah, might sound strange. They're not familiar in the English language. So I wrote... I've given you the spelling of Baha'u'llah, which is the special being who lived in the 1800s in the Middle East and who founded the Baha'i faith. Now, I wasn't brought up in the Baha'i faith. I was actually brought up in the Jewish faith, and when my family was an active participant in the local synagogue, and I was expected to remain in my faith, and that was my own expectations. I first encountered the Baha'i faith during my first year of college. My family and I were living in Connecticut at the time, and I and another buddy would frequent a coffee house where they played folk songs on weekends, and one evening there was a Baha'i performer. He had this little button saying Baha'i faith. I had never heard of it at that point, and I asked him about it, and he said, "I'll tell you during my break." And during his break, I learned the most fascinating thing. He talked about this concept which Baha'is label progressive revelation, in which we perceive all the great world religions as chapters in one continuing religion that mankind is receiving. And roughly on the average, I say every 1,000 years in human history, a great being who is somewhat more than human, but yet is not actual God, but is sent by God to reveal, according to the capacity and the needs of the particular culture and people he is born among, to give them the teachings that will advance civilization and bring mankind forward. And of course, these religions, because there was not the international communication we have today, were pretty much confined to at first the locality, and then as the enthusiasm and teaching spread, the region. So Buddhism developed and spread throughout the east of the world. Jewish religion in the vicinity of what is now Israel. And Christianity spread throughout what was then the Roman Empire. And Islam spread from Arabia throughout North Africa into Spain, and some historians see the advances in civilization that came through the teachings of Muhammad as triggering what we call the Renaissance in Christian Europe, bringing them out of the Dark Ages as they became aware of the spiritual and scientific truths that were being taught in the Islamic world. Now, in the 1800s, many religions, Christianity, Buddhism, Islam, all have teachings about some great being that would come in the future. And many of them who have studied the text for hints of when came up with the mid-1800s as that period. Now, they expected it in what we got as a very superstitious way, coming down on clouds and all this drama which is scientifically impossible. But at this time, in a not so quiet way, in Persia, which is now the territory called Iran, this divine teacher appeared. And Baha'u'llah, that's the name he took on as when he became a teacher, and it's Arabic for the glory of God. When his teachings were so advanced and at variance with what was believed at that time, that he ended up being opposed by great enemies, being imprisoned, tortured, just like Christ and other great revealers of truth. You know, he was given a very hard life, but throughout his lifetime, much of it as a prisoner of the Turkish Empire, he revealed his teachings, and these teachings are so appealing. When I met the Baha'is in the 1960s, there was a time in the United States of social unrest, and I was very much interested in the momentum toward racial equality and justice to widening democracy. And some of these Baha'i teachings taught in the 1800s include the essential oneness of humankind, eliminating the prejudices that keep us apart, recognizing the essential equality of men and women. And he advises the leaders of the world in Baha'u'llah's writings to provide education to all children and to seek a spiritual solution to economic injustice and to strive for universal peace upheld by a world federation. So I was as attracted to the social teachings as I was to the religious aspect. And as someone brought into the Jewish faith, as I learned more about it, as attending meetings and reading books during my first year of college, I realized in my heart that Baha'u'llah was the promised Messiah, the ones that the Jewish prophecies foretell, but which most contemporary Jews don't quite fully believe anymore. So that's how I got started on this path. And you know, it doesn't solve all your problems. You know, I've had to deal with various struggles with ADD, bouts of severe depression, difficulties and meeting challenges in career and life. But I've had this spiritual support, which I much appreciate. Now I'd like to launch into the topic, knowledge of God, and just give you some insights that come from the teachings of Baha'u'llah. Now, God, I perceive, is an unknowable essence, so far beyond our ability to understand that whenever we bring up the idea of God we might call him the all-powerful, the all-merciful, the unifier, so many words we use, but these are our words, our concept of powerfulness, our concept of love, mercy. It's all true. These are seen as attributes of God, but we're so far away from the essential reality. But yet in the Baha'i faith, despite this big difference, we're told that it's our responsibility to know God, to know and love God. There's a daily prayer, and many other Baha'is say each day, that begins with the sentence, I bear witness, O my God, that thou hast created me to know thee and to worship thee. Here's a few quotes from Baha'i writings about the importance of knowing God. God, through the direct operation of his unconstrained and sovereign will, chose to confer upon man the unique distinction and capacity to know him and to love him, a capacity that must needs be regarded as the generating impulse and the primary purpose underlying the whole of creation. So, God, this unknowable essence that empowered this physical reality and spiritual reality to exist, had in mind our human capacity, our spiritual human capacity to reach toward knowing and embracing with our full heart this reality. Another quote on this subject says that which leads to everlasting life, eternal honor, universal enlightenment, and true success is first and foremost the knowledge of God. It is clear that this knowledge takes precedence over every other knowledge and constitutes the greatest virtue of the human world. In knowledge of God is the core of spiritual progress and attraction, true vision and insight, and the exaltation of humanity. So we're told that our nobility, our highest part, is expanded when we seek to gain knowledge of God. Now, here's the problem. God is unknowable, and a few quotes on this. So perfect and comprehensive is God's creation that no mind or heart, however keen or pure, can ever grasp the nature of the most insignificant of his creatures, much less fathom the mystery of him who is the day star of truth, who is the invisible and unknown essence. Then, how could it be possible for man to understand the nature of that pre-existent essence, the divine being? The difference in station between man and divine reality is thousands upon thousands of times greater than the difference between the vegetable and the animal. And that which the human being would conjure up in his mind as divine is but a fanciful image of his human condition. It does not compass God's reality. So, as a Baha'i, I have this paradox. I'm commanded to know God, but the writings make it quite clear that I cannot know God. But there's some clarification, there's some road to hope, and I think these quotations kind of point the way. There are two kinds of knowledge: the knowledge of the essence of a thing and the knowledge of its attributes. The essence of each thing is known only through its attributes, otherwise that essence is unknown and unfathomed. As our knowledge of things, even created and limited ones, is of their attributes and not their essence, how then can it be possible to understand in its essence the unbound reality of divinity? For inner essence of a thing can never be known, only its attributes. And to clarify this difference between essence and attributes, think of someone or some animal or person who's really you have a close relationship with. And you know all about them. You've been living with them for years, and you know their behavior, you know their interactions, the things you like doing together. You know so much about this person or pet, and yet can you really say with certainty you know the absolute essence of this being? I don't think so. I don't even think we know the absolute essence of our own self, never mind others that are close to us. So, and these are things and beings on our level. So when we're thinking of our Creator, the power behind this universe, it kind of makes us feel humble. How can we ever know anything? But we're supposed to strive toward that knowledge. And one of the important things, tools, paths toward advancing on this path is what Baha'is call the manifestation of God, which are the great spiritual teachers like the Buddha, Baha'u'llah, Moses, Muhammad. We don't think these are just human beings like us that had a greater insight, and we don't believe it's God incarnate in the flesh, but we believe there's a level of existence between God's reality and human reality, and these are these great spiritual teachers that come roughly every 1,000 years and manifest in a body and live among us and give us what we need. Often it's geared to that particular need in this time. And Baha'u'llah is coming in the 1800s, before this global communication, the internet, international trade and relations. It is so right for this time because one of the central teachings is the oneness of humanity and giving us the spiritual and practical guidance that can help us move in the right direction. So speaking of the manifestation, I have some quotes here. These tabernacles of holiness, these primal mirrors which reflect the light of unfading glory, are but expressions of Him who is the invisible of the invisibles. By the revelation of these gems of divine virtue, all the names and attributes of God, such as knowledge, power, sovereignty, dominion, mercy, and wisdom, glory, bounty, and grace, are made manifest. So even though we can only get so far in thinking about God, it's like a step between God and our human level to look at these great divine teachers and see how they manifested qualities that represent God. Another quote says, "The knowledge of the reality of divinity is in no ways possible, but the knowledge of the manifestations of God is the knowledge of God, for the bounties, splendors, and attributes of God are manifest in them. Thus, whosoever attains the knowledge of the manifestations of God attains to the knowledge of God." That's like as far as we can get. And, in the case of Baha'u'llah, we have so much documented history of his life from childhood through all the stages of his ministry and his life, and because it's so recent, and his teachings were recorded, written up, approved by him. We know with so much more certainty that we're getting the divine message than we have in the past, where things might have gone by word of mouth for hundreds of years before they were ever written down in the Bible or other books. So the Baha'i Faith has a very rich abundance of teachings. I mean, like hundreds and thousands of volumes that came to him and were written down throughout his life. So talking about the attributes we can at least get a human understanding are contained in some of these references that could be references of God, or it could be references to Baha'u'llah, depending how you look at it. See, I see Baha'u'llah as a spiritual reality that did have a earthly life, lived for 70-something years, but his reality is spiritual reality far beyond what he manifested during his life on earth. So I think these apply to him, even though they also could be thought of as being attributes of God. The all-bountiful, the all-glorious, all-knowing, all-merciful, beneficent, compassionate, creator, desire of the world, supreme protector, most exalted being, most generous, most great spirit, most holy, unseen beauty, wise, loved one, majesty, maker, merciful, mercy, might, incomparable one, infinite spirit, inmost essence, ocean of everlasting bounty, possessor of all created things, potent, powerful, protector, pure and hidden one, quintessence of all truth. So I can't even get my mind around some of those phrases, but pondering these and seeing how these special divine teachers throughout history have given us examples we can look on. So I think I'm getting close to the end of my talk. I've mentioned some facts about the Baha'i Faith, and there is a Baha'i website on my sign, and I do have little handouts if you want some websites to follow up in your exploring what these Baha'i teachings and what Baha'u'llah's life was like. But I attempted to share a little bit of my own personal journey, how I came from Jewish youth, having grown up in the 1950s, to taking the drastic step of changing my religion in the 1960s. My parents, were quite upset that I changed religion. When I called and told them that I had, during the spring of my freshman year in college, become a Baha'i, my father's words over the phone was, "Well, you go and un-Baha'i yourself now." But they thought it was, a phase, something he's going through college. But it kind of lasted a lifetime, and later in their lifetime, they acknowledged it had a really good influence on me. It taught goodness, and they came to respect the faith, and I'm really grateful for that. So, as Baha'is, we're seeking to know and love God, but not just in an intellectual way. One thing we're seeking to do is live our lives so that we become an example of these divine qualities. In human terms, we're trying to become, as individuals, more caring, more compassionate, show consideration, cooperative, courage, creativity, enthusiasm, forgiveness, generosity, humility, idealism, joyfulness, kindness, love, loyalty, thankfulness, trustworthiness, truthfulness. These are just some of the human spiritual qualities that we want to be examples of. And I think people of all religions can take this path of actualizing and behaving in accordance to these divine attributes. And so it's been a pleasure for me to share a little bit of my spiritual journey and let you know there's these wonderful teachings in the world and this wonderful example in history from Baha'u'llah's earthly life. And I'll open for questions now.
First of all, thank you.
Thank you.